I want to go there because
No, I definitely go there. In my own business, I like technical. I like
I met Milana growing up.
like rapid ball. Yeah, that's some are correct. Some are not. Then I know that.
My name is what?
I like to. I
Jonathan Jackson, son of Jonathan Jackson. That side of it. Have you heard that? Oh, you heard my father. My father used to sell the hair products. Whenever you're ready. 1 minute. 1 minute. Oh, everyone.
College Alliance. No, I'm good. Have a shop. They're really good. So, age.
They are, yeah. Okay, whatever you customize them for those.
Shop on. Yeah, I love that.
He did that since
I was there.
Can you believe 5 years ago, I would never believe it.
So great.
I just remember you, the meeting, the campaign trail. I know these two since I know.
I found out because the person was church meeting.
They ended their contract. Yeah, but
As I said, my
maybe if I run
All right, why don't we get started? Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming this afternoon to the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. My name is Mark Fong, and I'm a faculty member here and the faculty director of the Ash Center. Being before somebody runs all of everything I've written through an AI. Land acknowledgement. Before I begin, the Ash Center would like to acknowledge that the land on which Harvard University sits is the traditional territory of the Massachusetts people. We also recognize the continuing presence of the neighboring Wampanoag and Nipmuc nations. The Ash Center is home for scholars, students, practitioners, dedicated to strengthening democracy around the globe. Our mission is to foster ideas and practices to strengthen democracy and self-government in a multi-ethnic, multiracial societies all around the world. This event is part of the Ash Center's Community Lunch Series. Usually what we mean by community is just the 100 or so people that are engaged directly sitting here at the Ash Center. But today it's just delightful that we're welcoming a much larger community. And I must say, a set of communities that Harvard University historically is not connected with very well. So huge thanks, Chip, for making these bridges. You'll note this event is being recorded so that people who cannot participate directly at this time will have the opportunity to engage with some of the content later. Our moderator, organizer, host extraordinaire is George Chip Greenidge, who really needs no introduction. We've been fortunate to have Chip as a democracy fellow for the past few years. He is founder and director of Greatest Minds. He's currently completing his doctorate at Georgia State University in the departments of sociology and African American studies with a concentration in race and urban studies. He received his master's degree in human development and psychology from the Harvard University Graduate School of Education and his bachelor's degree in political science from Morehouse College. He is, as I think most people in the room know, a longtime resident, activist, community convener in Cambridge, deep roots in Cambridge and the Boston area as well. You know, kind of reading George's list of remarkable accomplishments really doesn't do justice to the richness that he brings to all of us and our communities. At the Ash Center, we talk a lot about democracy and public policy and the hard edge of those things, sometimes economic development and what people can get or not get. And all of those issues are really important to George. I remember a couple of years ago when it was the Boston City Council elections, you hosted a series of discussions on nightlife in Boston, which is an important other side, a slogan from more than 100 years ago now from Lawrence, Massachusetts, is about bread and roses. Bread is important, but so are roses. And so the nightlife part of it is about the roses, which we can't forget. And so deep gratitude to Chip for convening this discussion about how government and business interact, and a face of inclusion, which is about lowering the obstacles and making government more inviting for all of the other organizations, especially small businesses, that can make life in Boston and Cambridge much richer for all of us. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I got to thank my Ash family to make sure that this event happened. The staff all in the room. Give a round of applause, everybody. 7 months ago, and they were like, no, all right? We want to do this in a new space, and we want you guys to deserve this energy and being in this new space. So I thank you for that, all right? The second thing I want to do is really, Maya Angelou always talks about, you know, when people are in rooms, your names stay on walls and if you breathe into it. So I love everyone just to say your name today as we open Black History Month and all that. So your vision and your life will always be in the Ash Center. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah. We welcome you and thank you for being a part of our family. Now, it's so interesting. This topic is something I've been, with many people in the room here today, been talking about for years, about ways that we can make the economic support more supportive for people of color, especially African Americans and Latinos in the city of Boston, and also in the greater Boston area. I would love to say big hello to former mayor, NAACP president, and my mentor, Kenneth E. Reed. So glad for him to be part of this conversation, and also many of you out here as well, just to have this moving forward. So before I go, I'll have everyone introduce themselves, but first I want the outstanding Ruthzee, City Council President.
All outstanding.
All right, just to start it off.
Thank you, Chip. Hello, everybody. I'm a little bit out of jurisdiction today. Sorry. All right, I'm welcome. I'm just so happy to be here to see some Cambridge folks and some Boston folks in the house. I'm Ruthzee Louijeune. I am president of the Boston City Council. As of I got to the position on January 1st, which was our inauguration day. By charter, you also had your first meeting on January 1st too. By charter, we're required to have our meetings on the first Monday of the year. That Monday, January 1st, is also Haitian Independence Day. I'm Haitian American, the first Haitian person on the Boston City Council, Haitian American council president. Black woman to lead in this role after Andrea Campbell and Kim Janey. And so it was incredible. It's an incredible honor for me to serve the entire city. I was born and raised here in Mattapan and Hyde Park. Interestingly enough, so I went to Harvard Law School and Harvard Kennedy School. I got a joint degree. Archon was one of my professors. So it's a very small world. But even smaller world, this building downstairs used to be my dentist office, right? So I would come all the way to Cambridge because my mom worked at Cambridge Hospital for 34 years. And so this was where our dentist was. And so it's just really trippy whenever I'm here. Anyways, yeah, so born and raised, a product of our public schools, lawyer, started my career representing families facing eviction and foreclosure. I care deeply about Boston and the greater Boston area, having spent some time a good amount of time in Cambridge and having the family connection here. I care about sharing prosperity. We are a city with a lot of wealth, and we don't do a good job of sharing it, right? When we talk about the racial wealth gap, when we talk about redlining and blockbusting, these are intentional government and private market practices that further cemented what essentially was a caste system where Black folks had a hard time buying homes when in neighborhoods like Mattapan, Roxbury, and Dorchester, where Jewish community and the Black community wanted to integrate the private market together with government forces, prevented that inclusion from happening. So we have a lot of work to do in the city of Boston. We have a lot of work to do for our businesses to make sure that they have the resources they need to be successful, especially our Black and brown businesses. We're talking about all the time, we're talking about resources. We're talking about a gap in capital and what we're doing at the city level to address that. I got my start, my first time at city council when I was 24, actually a student here at the Kennedy School. It's also trippy that it's also I remember I was running late to my ethics class at the Kennedy School on my first time at the city council when I was a student, because Harvard Yale plays a yearly game, and the Black students at Harvard and Yale, when it was in Boston, wanted to throw a party, and we wanted to throw a party downtown. You remember this?
I remember.
So I showed up to this club looking, everyone looking good, dressed to the nines, pure. We got there, nice new spot. We couldn't have the party. And we're like, why can't we have the party? They're like, there's an electrical fire. I was like, I don't see no fire nowhere. And we couldn't have the party. Later we found out it's because they thought they were having a party for Harvard Yale students. They didn't think they were having a party for Black students. And so I was like, hold up. Testified before the Boston City Council, before Councilor Ayanna Pressley. Councilor Ayanna Pressley held a hearing on discrimination, went and testified before the Attorney General's office, and the club had to issue an apology. The employees had to go to non-discrimination training, and they had to pay a fine. And so when we talk about the issue of nightlife and how we're supporting our businesses, it's something that matters deeply, deeply, deeply to me. That was my first entry to local government, to being before the city council, and now I'm back as the president of the city council. So it's a really full circle moment. I have a story about being discriminated against at nightclubs here, at a bar here in Cambridge, but I'll talk about that later. I want to pass the mic.
Wow. Pass the mic. Here we go. Cipher. Do it like a cipher.
Ayesha Wilson. I'm a city councilor here in Cambridge, and first-term city councilor. I was a two-term school committee member here in Cambridge. Grew up here my whole K-12 education. I'm also a social worker. I've been working with young people since the early 2000s. So youth development is really my near and dear to me. When I think about my work and coming into public policy and public office, it was really thinking about how we look at the inequities around education, specifically around the MCAS, which, like it, hate it, whatever, it is the tool that we use to assess kind of where our students are. But it also shows the wide gaps of where our, specifically our Black and brown students are, our African-American kids. Before coming here today, I was actually at a presentation with fifth graders at our King Open School and talking about my work and leadership. And I showed them a slide specifically of African-American students and white students and that disparity, that gap. For our white students, 2017, 18, 19, it showed 70% on the MCAS in terms of proficient or advanced, compared to 20% of Black African-American students. And students, those 10, 11-year-olds were automatically like, damn. No, but they were like, damn, that's a problem. And I said, yes, it is. It absolutely is. And this is why my work and the voices of so many others on the school committee, but even on the council, are thinking about how do we impact, how do we dismantle these injustices so that our Black and brown students specifically are able to achieve those high levels like their white and Asian peers. And so being on the council, it really thought, running for council, there were 3 open seats. And for me and in Cambridge, we have the ranked choice, which like it or hate it. But it is something that it was an opportunity to really think about how I can leverage my voice and my skill and all the great things that I was able to do on the school committee and bring it to the council. Elected, I am the 3rd Black woman and 4th woman of color in the history. I don't take that experience and the work or the shoulders of the ancestors and whose shoulders I stand on. Rest in peace, Sandra Graham, who was our first Black woman elected to city council, who just passed last summer. And so I think about how we look at Black businesses, how we look at Black needs and resources in our cities, and how we're actually giving the contracts in the same way that we do to others. And that is really problematic. It was just a Globe article, and we'll talk more about this, but I just want to sit with the fact that $260 million out of that 60,000 went to Black businesses, or Black vendors.
How many years?
5 years. Out of 5 years. 260 million and only 60,000 went to Black vendors. Problematic beyond anything. So we will talk more about that. I look forward to doing the work. I look forward to getting the support to continue to think about how we push our city around accountability and transparency. And thank you all.
I'm really glad to be here. I'm Marisa Nieves. I'm the Director of Massachusetts Programs with a Roxbury-based nonprofit innovation studio. Innovation Studio provides innovation centers and business support resources to the community. As a Roxbury-based organization, we work closely with aspiring entrepreneurs and current entrepreneurs, all the way up from I have an idea until I have a micro business and I'm looking to grow it. We really hone in on our partnership so that way we can support entrepreneurs through any flow of where they're at and where their journey is. So that way we know our niche really is those folks who don't know where to go, don't know where to turn, and need support in starting. And then we can pass them off to our partner organizations who can help them on their next step of their journey. For me, it's really awesome to be up here. I met Chip a year ago, just based off of being in the community and saying, hey, what do you guys do? And that's kind of my personality is I'm curious. Who are you? We're neighbors. So we should know each other and see how we can work collaboratively. I have my graduate certificate from UMass Boston in gender leadership and public policy, and I'm currently an impact investing fellow through NEIII. So all of my work has been around sustainable impact, as well as how are we creating systemic change, generational wealth, and community wealth from the ground up. Because those of you who write policy know it's not fun. That's why I didn't go with that. I went through the programmatic lens, so that way we can really create some change.
Good afternoon, I'm Dennis Benzan. I want to thank Chip for convening this really important meeting today, and all of the distinguished panelists. Chip grew up down the street from me in Cambridge. And I consider Chip like omnipresent, kind of like God everywhere. So,
Please don't give him that. Please.
Life of a party, life of the community. Most importantly, Chip gives life to young people.
Yes.
Life to young people here in Cambridge, in Boston, and in Atlanta, and Washington, D.C., everywhere he goes. And so we are incredibly grateful to have had somebody like Chip, and Chip's father actually taught me how to ski. And you guys should know this, Bet. There's a very important club in Boston called YES. Yes. When I was in high school, there was a man, white man named Krasnoff, Mike Krasnoff, that worked with his dad to make sure that young people of color could ski and learn how to ski. And we went to YES and he took us to Utah. And I remember being up at Snowbird skiing, and his father was behind the grill, grilling hamburgers for us in Utah. And so Chip comes from a line of folks that have always done great things in the community. So I grew up in a predominantly Latino neighborhood in Cambridge called Columbia Terrace. And Columbia Terrace was considered a disproportionately impacted community, which is a term that we're using nowadays, because it had high incarceration rates. We were the first neighborhood in the city, and still to this day, to ever have surveillance cameras because of the drug activity that was happening in our neighborhood. And so I came out of that and graduated from Engine Latin, went to Howard University. And when I got out of Howard University, I decided that I wanted to get into politics. And so I ran for the state legislature. And I ran at a time where in the history of Massachusetts was only one Latino legislator ever elected. That was Nelson Merced. And so I ran as an independent against a longtime African-American incumbent as an independent. And I nearly defeated him, very small margin, one of the largest voter turnouts in the history of Cambridge, if you go back and look at the history. And there's actually a great article that I actually ran into the other day in the Harvard Crimson about that particular race. Now, just before that, I had the great honor of working with Ken Reeves, who's here with us today. And the world works in strange ways. Ken was one of the few elected officials besides Sandra Graham, may she rest in peace, that came into our neighborhood, and I got to learn who Ken was. And Ken hired me at one point in time to be his director of the Mayor's Youth Employment Program, which was responsible for training young people in Cambridge to get into the job market.
You were real young. That beat a lot of people.
Yes, yes. I was very young. I was 21 years old.
They thought you were crazy then.
I was calling Ken from Howard University, and I said, Ken, I really want that job. Why? Well, because youth employment is a very important part of a young person's life if they're going to have success later on in life. And so as we have this discussion today about nightlife and business, we've got to keep in mind that the most important reason why any of us want to create business and economic development is because we're creating jobs. And I'll talk about this a little bit more when we answer some of the questions, but you know, I'm in a position right now where I have well over 100 employees. 97% of my employees are Black and brown. 97% of my employees make a lot more than a living wage, right? And the reason why I care so much about that is that, you know, people like Ken paved the way to give me an opportunity to learn why job creation was so important. And I'll fast forward a little bit. And the last point here is that in 2013, I was elected to the Cambridge City Council as the first Latino in the history of Cambridge to be elected to the Cambridge City Council. And my purpose for running that race was that my mother and father came here in the 60s from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic to work in the factories of Kendall Square. Those factories gave people a chance to enter the middle class. And so my family transitioned out of the projects into a home that they purchased in the late 70s from money that they made from working in Kendall Square. Fast forward 2013 and throughout the 21st century, and a little bit of the 20th century, Kendall Square transformed into Google and all of these companies that are computer and biotech based. You literally have housing developments in front of these companies that don't produce the workers that are necessary to work in these environments. So when I ran for the city council, I ran on the idea that we needed to create science, technology, education, arts, and mathematics training for our kids. And my influence for that was Robert Moses, who I worked for as a community organizer, who taught me that in the 21st century, if you want to be a citizen, you must learn math and science. Whereas in the 60s, it was the right to vote. So I started that work on the council, and I was successful at creating this, maybe 10 years later it happened, but it did happen, the Foundry building in Kendall Square, which was to be a base for science and technology training for our young people. And so that work continues to inform everything that I do nowadays. In the middle of all that too, I worked as a lawyer for about 15 years. And now I'm doing a lot of other things, including a restaurant owner, nightclub owner, and I own 3 cannabis retail stores, which I'll get into those challenges later. So thank you.
Dennis was vice mayor, am I right? And I remember your brother and I were best friends in grammar school. And I remember he came up to me one day and said, I think we were 13. He said, Chip, you know what? My father looks exactly like you. All right? Just letting you know that the Black and Latino are always strong and together. Just to let you know that today. So please, jump right in. Sean.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Hope, and it's funny that I actually grew up around the corner from Chip and Dennis in Area 4. And as we look back, I really think some really great people came out of our neighborhood. So I'm a son of Cambridge. My grandparents emigrated from Barbados to Cambridge in the 1930s. And previously before that, we had family here. So I am a 5th generation Cantabrigian. And I'm really proud to be from a city, as Dennis and Chip said, Cambridge was a very different place in the 80s. Our neighborhood was actually featured on HBO. It was Lockdown on Crack Street. I remember I shouldn't have been watching HBO at 10 years old, but I was watching it. And I said, Ma, that's Norfolk Street. And they really were looking at our neighborhoods because of the crack epidemic. And so, being from Caribbean descent, there was Dominican, there was Irish, there was Italian, and Cambridge was really this place for workforce. People were workers, but they were from many different nationalities. And at the same time, Cambridge always was blessed with the university. So I was in school with people that were doctors, scientists, people who had English for as their first language, all together in this melting pot. And it's really shaped my life. And I'm an entrepreneur. I've really, held many jobs. Just to give you a background, I practiced as an attorney for 12 years, and again, following my big uncle's footsteps. And then I started working on development, and I've built 60 units of affordable housing in Cambridge, on Mass Ave and other places. When you talk about government supporting businesses, I've worked with federal money, subsidized loans and grants. I've also been fortunate to get into the cannabis industry. Similar to Dennis, I own 2 dispensaries, and we together have kind of jumped into this new venture where there was opportunities for Black and brown people to have an impact on an industry. And I think as we talk about how government can impact, I think Dennis and myself maybe have a slightly different perspective on maybe how government can help, but also can create challenges. But I just was thinking about it as I was walking by here today, and I've seen this building, growing up as a kid in Harvard Square. Never knew what was in it. And frankly, but there's a lot of buildings in Harvard Square that never felt like they were for me. I would walk by, go to the pit, and go get my hair cut and do some other things. And if you remember the pit, right? The pit is like, there's a lot of the edginess is gone. But I really want to thank, Chip and the Ash Center for inviting folks like us in here to be able to share our experiences, because I do feel like through these conversations, and with social media and the way these conversations will be broadcast, that someone will see this and recognize that folks like us from our own neighborhood, not from some great place, at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, but people from the neighborhood have been able to succeed and thrive with the help of mentors and programs like this. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, I have a bunch of round robin questions that I'm going to go for you two first, then I go to you, then I go to you. Okay, so I'm going to get this going. The first thing is that we got to thank the catering of La Fabrica. And also, as you know, Sean, where's your business going to be? It's like a block away from here, right?
Yeah, so on Church Street, 31 Church Street, right by Lizzie's Ice Creams, across from the Painted Bodo, is my second dispensary. Is going to be called Yamba Boutique.
So we are here to give you good food and also to give you a good time, some good energy during your lunch breaks, everybody. So be ready for that. Okay? So I'm going to give a round robins to get these two going. These two for you. How did you wind up in the entrepreneurial space? You already answered that. What was your business and how did you start up? But also, what advice do you have for starting businesses up there? And also talk about your startup story about what got you in this kind of space.
So how did I get started in entrepreneurial space? Well, you grow up poor. Part of an immigrant community. I like to travel to the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. And one of the things that fascinates me most about the Dominican Republic when I go there is that there's young people, old people on the corners selling whatever they can sell because they're poor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so in Cambridge, one of the reasons why Mayor Reeves was always supportive of festivals was because festivals mean a lot for our community. Festivals are an opportunity for us to get together, to have a good time, to respect each other, honor this culture. But more importantly, back then, when there were hardly any Latino and Black businesses anywhere, it was an opportunity for families to sell things like food, right? And so when we had these festivals, I would sell food. I would sell pinchos, and I would sell empanadas, and I would do things like that. And so, poquito as well. And so we come from a place where entrepreneurship is an inherent part of who we are. But in our communities, we tend to only see entrepreneurship through the lens of narco trafficking. Mm-hmm. Right? And so when I got into the cannabis space, and I'll talk just a little bit about this, and because it's a very, very complex situation, and I'm going to ask that we have a lot of brilliant minds in this room. I have wanted to write a law review article about the problem that has happened with cannabis that is going to cause people like Sean and I to go out of business. Okay. I'm going to talk about the challenges of over-regulating an industry that should not be over-regulated because it does the opposite of what it's meant to do. But more importantly, I'm going to talk about why we cannot continue to talk about economic development and an increase in Black wealth through sound bites. I am one of the only, if you want to call me African-American, you want to call me Black, you want to call me Latino in Cambridge, I'm one of the only people that comes from our community that holds a liquor license. Oh. Okay. We're talking about, many, many restaurants, many, many lounges. And so I've been able to accomplish that. And the burden of operating a place like La Fabrica, which I'll quickly describe to you guys, it's a live music lounge, it's a nightclub, it's a restaurant. What La Fabrica does for live music, no one else does for live music. Besides Wally's and Slade's and Grace Spinier, the first two, I sit on their shoulders. Right? And so you have all of these musicians that come out of Berkeley, and you have professors that frequent the place, and I pay them every week, 3 days a week, to perform. And I do that because we don't have safe places in Boston. And by safe, I don't necessarily mean that there's going to be a shooting, although when I got the opportunity to take over a place that was there once before, was called Moxa, The reason why it was scaled back and it was shut down was because it was a shooting, right? And so follow me for one quick second, okay? Because this is the deep challenge of nightlife. So I take over the space and I do it through the lens of the young boy, the young man that grew up in my neighborhood that was full of culture. As Sean pointed out, my neighborhood had Jamaicans, Haitians, people from Barbados, Irish, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, and we all lived together. And so it was very rich in culture. And I said, there's nothing in the Boston area that folks like us could go to and feel comfortable and not feel like you're going to get shot. And creating a space like that is really, really hard. Really, really hard. One, because the license commission is not going to have pity on you if something does happen. But remember that when you create a space where you're drawing a cross-section of your community, because you don't want to discriminate, right? You don't want to stand at the door and say, you can't come in because you're wearing a hoodie and a hat. You can come in, you can't come in. You don't want to do that. But remember that every single element of your community, if your business is open to them, is going to attract everybody, right? And so the one place that always almost guarantees that people will not act up is a place where people go to listen to live music, right? And so that created a natural filter, right? And so the problem that we face now is that I have a heavy burden because my place is busy. There are lines for people to get in. People do come in and feel safe. They feel the authentic culture. They feel that it's not a place that's fabricated, it's manufacturing culture, right? The food is real. The people that work there are real. The immigrants that work there are real. But then you run into a city that is trying to overregulate. So for example, this is where this particular situation comes in. Everybody cares about climate change. If you create a policy that requires a restaurant like me to have electric equipment in the kitchen, and I only have a certain amount of time to replace that equipment, right? Guess what? Wages are up, cost of food is up. I don't know when's the last time you guys went to a place to buy like pork. So we sell a lot of chicharrón de cerdo. Guess what happened with chicharrón de cerdo? There was a law passed a couple years ago where if it's kept if it's not free range chicken and pork, you can't sell it in Massachusetts. So we can't even source chicharrón de cerdo, right? And if you try to source it, you're paying double for it. So now the city is requiring to make all of these changes and updates that cost an incredible amount of money without taking into account how that impacts the same immigrants that they're saying they want to have employed in spaces, right? And or the small businesses that they're trying to incubate. And the cannabis is the same exact thing. It's the challenge of overregulation, not giving you an opportunity to really generate and create the kind of wealth that they talk about, right? Because everybody is more in tune to sound bites and words like social justice and economic justice without really knowing what the challenges for people like Sean and I that are on the ground, dealing with these challenges every day, dealing with taxes, dealing with landlords. Those are the real challenges. And I think that as we think about, what are the next steps from here about creating entrepreneurship, is creating incubators where people like us can go and talk to the young people that are desperate for the type of knowledge necessary to succeed in this environment.
I'm gonna pass this on to Ruthzee. I remember there was some legislation, I think yourself and Julie here put this forward about home kitchens.
Residential kitchens.
Talk about how that actually came about.
So that was actually, I'm in my second term as a city councilor. That was before my time. It's just to make it easier for people who are want to engage in commerce in their homes. But it can't be for cooked items, nothing that requires refrigeration. So it's actually sort of like limited in its sort of capacity in terms of what it's able to do. But it is sort of that innovation for sort of how do we help small, people who are entrepreneurs, but like maybe selling to friends or something like that, or baking, and you tell people to show up at this time, and you make a plate get you a plate for $5. I have a woman who makes. There are any Trinidadians in the house? She makes doubles. Oh, okay, some Trini. Oh yeah, okay, of course, yeah. But because doubles require you to use oil and fry the bread, it wouldn't fall under that ordinance. But
talk about other things too, but also about food trucks as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I actually wanted to talk about with Dennis, when you were saying, I was waiting, I was like, over, what's going to be the word that follow? Over, and you said regulation. I was like, oh, okay. So, and then as a person of government, like, we are the ones responsible for the regulations. But actually what I hear when I talk to cannabis entrepreneurs in Boston is actually oversaturation being an issue for some folks, especially for Black and brown entrepreneurs in the downtown area, for example, where you sort of make them less competitive by citing another cannabis shop close to one another. And so there's the whole idea that, there's a buffer zone, and there's a buffer zone for several reasons. But in order for us to get to the licensing level that we want for cannabis, you're going to have to pierce the buffer zone, but in so doing, you lead to oversaturation issues. So that's the issue that I've heard about. I've also heard about some regulation issues. I mean, that is our problem as a city when it comes to permitting and licensing, whether it's for new businesses, whether it's for development, is that oftentimes the bureaucracy can be too much. And who can afford for ISD to sit on a permit for 7 months, for a year? If you are putting all of your income and all of your efforts into this business, you can't afford that unless you have backup capital, and that tends not to be Black and brown folks. And so there's a lot that we need to do. This is what I thought you were going to talk about, Chip. Councilor-At-Large and I have filed for liquor licenses, because we know the barriers in Boston. A liquor license on the open market right now costs $600,000. $600,000 on the private market. And a neighbor like Jamaica Plain, which is one of our neighborhoods, shout out to my chief of staff, Emily, in the back, she lives in Jamaica Plain. They're losing a lot of their mom and pop liquor licenses. Businesses are closing, and who buys them up? The new chain downtown in the Seaport, right? So not only are we losing that fabric in our communities, in order to get a drink, you're sort of funneling everyone to the Seaport to go to the next. It's not the Chili's chain, but I used to grow up going to Chili's Copley Square. But you know what I mean? These places that are these institutions that are coming to our neighborhoods. And so we file legislation to get 250 liquor licenses over 50 years, over 5 years in certain neighborhoods to make it easier, because oftentimes the profit margin in your returns, if you're a restaurant owner, okay, you can nod your head yes or no, Dennis, is often in the sale of that liquor is where you can get the profit margins. And so we filed for that legislation. It wouldn't be, they would have to buy it on the open market. It would be restricted to neighborhoods, so that if a business goes out of sale, that they can't sell that, doesn't have a value, you can't sell it to the Seaport, it has to stay and revert in the neighborhood of Dorchester. I'm born and raised in Mattapan. Mattapan doesn't have one sit down restaurant where I can go and have a drink. Wow. Not one. That's a problem. And Hyde Park is where I live now, also where I was raised, right next door to Mattapan. We're just now getting more, more licenses in that neighborhood. So we're working on it.
Yeah, and as a real-time example too, like my work, a lot of it while I'm the director of Massachusetts programs, is day-to-day on the ground with the entrepreneurs. In Roxbury, there's 2 restaurants that have a liquor license. One of them, she's about to sell hers because that's the only option she thinks she has. So those are what a lot of the entrepreneurs are facing. And it's real. Those are places where entrepreneurship, it's the heart of the city. It's thriving, but why would you stay if you can't afford it? Why are you going to pursue your dreams if you know it's just going to die out really quick? Or there's another hoop. The amount of times people are saying, oh, the $525 fee for an LLC. LLC isn't your only option, but that's what they think a lot of times. And that barrier, if it's an annual, oh my goodness, well, okay, I'm just starting out. So when it comes to the licensing, it's a real barrier for our communities that we're serving. And it doesn't help if you have 2 places that have a liquor license and you really want to attract folks to go to your area, experience your culture, where are they going to go if you're not giving them those opportunities?
Marisa, I'm going to do my best Phil Donahue, all right, right here and go, you know, do they really have the skills?
Oh my gosh, great question.
Or is it a money? I mean, just go ahead.
Well, oh, let's get on my soapbox. I see you. They have the skills. The skills are there. It's all of the above, because if you don't have that network and that capital, so it's all the different capitals. I mean, we're in a very smart place. We know that capital isn't just money. There's social capital, cultural capital, all of the above. And those are the areas that are lacking at times, or the resources aren't available because they don't know where to turn, or there's a geographical barrier of, oh, if I want to, like for me, Innovation Studio, we work in Roxbury. If you Google resources for an entrepreneur, small business owner in the area, not many pop up. But if you go 3 miles to Seaport or in Cambridge, you have all of the opportunities. And a lot of times folks just think, oh, if I live in this zip code, I can only do X, Y, and Z. I can't be a tech-based startup. I can't do this. But it's like, yes, you can. And how can we get you there? So a lot of those one-on-one technical assistance that we can provide, as long as we have funding, which Massachusetts does not provide us the funding to do so, which is a barrier in itself, because for us, our one-to-ones are expert advisors, small businesses that are 2 to 3 steps ahead of where someone is. So that way, we're sourcing from micro businesses and themselves to facilitate, giving them a stipend, but that costs money, and that helps us diversify our pool of mentorship as well. So the skills are there. It's just, where do I turn? Having those resources to be able to generate that wealth. A key aspect of what I do is, how can we get folks who look like our entrepreneurs and do the same thing in the room? A lot of times the people who can afford to be volunteers or advisors are folks who are older white men, and they just can't connect in a way that is culturally responsive, but also just meets the needs of where the entrepreneur is at. If you say I need support with marketing, I could easily ask a VP of some company, but they're not at the same stage of understanding, I don't have a budget of this, and I'm not able to get to that point. You're 6, 7, 8 years ahead of where I am. I need someone who understands what it's like to run a small business. I need someone who can help grow my network and not just view me as, if we're talking in terms of financial capital, just an investment. Like, I want you to see me as an investment for my business, be an advisor. Jennifer Mendoza is she runs Mendoza Ventures in Newberry Street. And she always says, if I'm going to give money to someone, I'm not just giving them money for their company. I'm also going to be a partner for them. I'm going to give them those connections, because if I'm investing in your company, I'm also investing in you and what that means. So a lot of times this wealth comes back to, how can I support my family? How can I get my kids into college or whatever they want to do? So every time you're spending your dollar at that store, you're supporting that family and you're helping them get that network that they are looking for. And you're just being a good person.
I'm going to pass it on to you real quick, but I wanted you to just say something. Do you have angel investors, and how do you find them?
The money.
So actually, I am an angel investor in a project that's a nutraceutical, basically trying to find a way to help sick patients who take cannabis to be able to balance their high. So if you're taking a lot of cannabis every day just to be able to function, there's not a product in the market that doesn't have THC in it that can help basically you function and operate in this world. But and I'm glad you asked that. But one of the real benefits of being an entrepreneur is I have been able to work with so many different Black and brown folks who have skills, who have ideas, but they don't necessarily have the access. And I have been fortunate to have a family that had access, and people like Mayor Reeves, Denise Simmons, Ayesha have all continued to help me with that access. But I think one of the challenges with government is that there's a limitation on what it can do. And so oftentimes when you take somebody who is trying to get an opportunity, there's an entitlement that's created. And this is, okay, we'll create a class of opportunity for you. But I really feel like, it's the opportunity, it's the access. But one thing that's often forgotten is options, right? When the government gives you an opportunity to build affordable housing, you can do it, but you have to do it like this. These regulations were written often 20 years ago, like 40B, and they haven't updated. In cannabis, the same way. We're going to create an entitlement for you. We're going to give you opportunity, access, but we're going to give you the flexibility to operate in the market. And one of the things when I meet Black and brown entrepreneurs, and at 47, I'm now a mentor, right? And I had lots of mentors for me. It's that I say you have to have options. Once you get there and you open the store, what then? And oftentimes that's where government can't control market forces. And so, Cambridge is a great place that provides access and opportunity. But those options really come when government recognizes there's only so far I can help folks. And I think it's incumbent upon us to be the angel investor, to be that mentor. And in my story, I had lots of white mentors. They were the people that showed me, hey, come to this meeting, sit in this room, and you look around and you realize no one's smarter than me. They just maybe had opportunities and access that I didn't have. So as I say to the government, folks like Dennis, myself, and entrepreneurs, we are always going to push the boundaries of the rules. We're going to say the market wants this, and government, I feel, is oftentimes catching up. And so, one of the things that we're doing is saying to my mentees, it's just not enough to get the license and get the store open. The same business metrics apply for everybody. So after government has ended up helping you, if you're in a down market and you've invested millions of dollars in cannabis, there's nothing government can do. And so I'm trying to, for myself and for people coming up, don't just look at the next entitlement, figuring out what entitlement do you actually want and help make that happen. And I say that as a critique, but I also recognize there's a lot of cities and towns that don't do nearly as much as Cambridge and Boston have done. But Dennis and I find ourselves we took an opportunity, we invested large amounts of capital, and our biggest challenge is frankly, options. There are these ties to these opportunities that aren't in the market. And so our white counterparts maybe had more capital, but they have options. And so that's just a big thing that I think that doesn't get talked about. It's, you want the opportunity, you want access, and then it's all going to work out. And I think we all know that we face the same challenges, if not more, than other groups in that same space.
Now, I want to push this over to, right here. You're about to file some legislation, I heard, so go for it.
Yes, thank you. Hot off the press. It'll actually be submitted on Thursday. But again, going back to the Globe report, the disparity study that the city of Cambridge did about a year ago, that really just showcase just how inequitable our contracts and how we're giving them out to individuals, especially Black vendors, is really just an issue. And how do we push and hold our city accountable to do this work? What does this disparity study actually say to us in terms of how we're going to hold ourselves accountable? Because we know that this is an issue. Well, one, we need to name it, that it is an issue. But I think really it hones in on who's at the table making these decisions and how we have actually gotten here, right? We didn't get here necessarily by accident. We got here based on the people that are actually at those seats doing that work. And so I am really grateful to be at the seat now, to be able to push on and say, this is a problem, we need to do better. And as a Black woman, really looking at our Black businesses, young entrepreneurs, and making sure that they have some opportunities to actually have the road, the pathway to get to where they need to be and where they deserve to be. There's a lot of work that's happening. This order that will go in, thanks, shout out to my legislative aide, Jake, who's in the back here, thank you, who's been doing a lot of research, but also helped me to put this policy order together. It'll be shared, it'll go in on Thursday. It's gonna have former Mayor and City Councilor Siddiqui, Vice Mayor Mark McGovern, and Mayor Simmons to be a part of this, to actually say, one, we want to really refer it to the Economic Development Committee so that we actually dive deeper in it. But what I'm hoping for is that our mayor actually appoints an ad hoc committee. So that way, and I hope to chair it, that way we're really looking at the issues of Black communities and how we're looking at the Black dollar. What does the city of Cambridge is very resource rich, and as we know, Boston is as well. But again, if we're not being intentional on how we're using our dollars, then we're just going to continue to exacerbate the same challenges that we had over and over again. And I'm not about history repeating itself, not in that way. And so I look forward to my fellow colleagues supporting this and making sure that we actually get to work on it, because the proof is in the pudding. The dollars don't make sense. They don't add up. And when you see $60,000 going to Black vendors, you know, my aide makes more than $60,000 in a year. And so if we can't give more of those contracts to Black business owners, then what are we doing as a city? And I look forward to being counseled on how to continue to do the work and being pushed on what we're doing here. I also want to shout out Nicola Williams, who's here as founder of the Cambridge Somerville Business Network.
Cambridge Somerville Black Business Network. I'm just a facilitator.
Facilitator, but she does amazing work, and also founder of the Cambridge Carnival. Just want to really shout her out for that. But you know, the work that she's doing with the Cambridge Somerville Black Business Network is really making sure that we are looking at these inequities and that we are pushing on making sure that it is becoming more equitable and being more evenly distributed, because it's not making sense right now. And I feel like the work that she did, even Councilor Donovan had pushed on some of these issues too. I think it was his work that helped to push on making sure the study came about. But at the end of the day, we have work to do, and I am not about to sit in this seat and see this work pass me by, in a sense where I'm not going to get busy and roll up my sleeves. But I'm really looking for you all to help roll up your sleeves as well and get busy in the work, because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be just standalone. And as a second Black woman to be on the council, or at this moment with Denise, with the mayor, we just have some serious work to do. And it's just unfortunate that we got to this place.
I do want to take some questions. I know we are going to be running out of time, and we have another event right after here, but we're more than welcome to hang out by the kitchen and out there as well. We got lots of good food left. He made sure he gave us extra, y'all, so give it up, all right? But I just want to make sure, like, you know, I know the Ash Center is about hoping this space can also be a working group space. So I hope, and I know that Archon and Tim and everybody is about that, making sure that. So we welcome you to bring your ideas and people here as well. But I also want to big up the space of Charles Ogletree, who's been a major proponent of making sure that Counting Down talks. So we bring him in the room today, and just be so forth as well. I want to get some questions, and I'm going to do a last round robin, and then let me get a couple questions, then we'll do a round robin. Do you want to say something quick? Yeah, just really quick. So I wanted to bring up, really highlight a point that Sean brought up. Oftentimes in the business context, and Ayesha, as you wake your way through the council, this is I'm asking you to do something, but it's also a little bit of advice about how we can kind of get some things done. So we can fight for individuals, and in particular in the cannabis world, to have access, right? So we want to open up the doors. We lost that opportunity in Massachusetts in the cannabis world because we allowed the large companies that were vertically integrated to open up first, right? And they opened up for several years. That set us back, and we were not really able to catch up, and we're still not able to catch up. I am the only minority cannabis business in Massachusetts that has 3 stores: 98 Winthrop, Central Square, and Chelsea. I have employees that were a requirement of being an economic empowerment company that are Black and brown. I have investors that are Black and brown. The industry right now is in crisis. If you saw, the former chairwoman is under grand jury investigation. The state legislature has no idea what's going on. Our local cities and towns do not really understand the challenges that we're going through. And so the problem that we face right now with overregulation is that in Cambridge, for example, the 40 or so investors that I invested in my company cannot transition out.
They will never make their money back from dividends because the margin is so small. We're essentially sharecroppers. We pay vendors, we pay landlords, and we pay taxes. And that is where the bulk of your money goes. And so you're left with really no margin to really cover your expenses. And so we're at a place right now, and I've been meeting with legislators and I've been meeting with local officials where we can't say that we want equity in cannabis just to say it. We're in it. It's happening, right? And there are folks out here that are trying to protect an industry for the sake of equity when it makes no sense, because you have companies like ours that are going to go under without the support that was promised us, right? There was a pipe dream. We were like, 40 acres and a mule. We were promised 40 acres and a mule. They said, if you open up and you do X, Y, and Z, we're going to give you X amount of money. We haven't gotten a dime yet, right? So now it's risking our investors because we can't transition out, which kind of gets to the point with what Sean was raising. If you look at this within the welfare system, right? In the welfare system, the system is meant for you to transition out. My family transitioned out into a house. In housing, if you stay in a place that's limited equity co-op for 10, 20, 15 years, you only get a little bit back if you sell. That doesn't build wealth. In cannabis, if I can't sell my company to whomever I want in the universe, I can't build wealth, not only for myself, but for our investors. So we can't go around saying that we're trying to create equity to generate wealth when we're creating our very own barriers, right? And we're over-regulating it because it's almost like we're trying to protect ourselves from ourselves. And we're trying to punish the large companies that we legislated that could get open up whenever they wanted to because they don't support equity. Why would a large company support equity? Everywhere in this country right now, they're removing equity, inclusion, and diversity programs, right? So we're going down that path. And so in our community, we're making it as difficult as possible for us not to survive as business people. And so the biggest advice that I give young people that are getting into business is beware of what you're getting yourself into. Because if you don't have the skill set, and I'm lucky and Sean is lucky that we have a pretty diverse skill set. I'm a lawyer. I was in elected office. I run a business. So I can handle all this, which is why I'm one of the few, I'm actually the only one that has 3 stores, right? So I asked our 2 very important leaders that are here today that when you get back to the council, to please take a look at this industry, remove the barriers that are in place right now that don't allow us to access capital markets, that don't allow us to get out of the industry that we, pioneered in many ways for our community.
For you two, I know we're going to get one question back here, but are you finding yourselves approaching this more as a regional, kind of looking at Boston, Cambridge, Brookline as working together? I know back in Menino world, and I know Ken knows this, it was like Menino would go to a national conference and say, Harvard is in Boston and MIT is in Boston, and then Ken Reeves goes in the back.
Harvard's land is in.
All right, and then Ken Reeves would go up right after and say, "I had to give Mayor Menino a geography lesson," but where that actually is. But it's the regional approach. Can this work by working together regionally on these issues?
I'll just quickly say 60% of Harvard's land is in the city of Boston. So wanted to say that.
Where does the president sit?
Okay, fair point, Mayor. I believe that. So it's in Cambridge, but 60% of its wealth, we're talking about wealth and ownership, is in Boston. I will say that there are a lot of things that we need to be working on regionally. Like I think transit is a regional issue. I think housing is a regional issue. I think I think education is a regional issue if we're really talking about it. Like that's a really hard one. Think about the role that highways have played in really destroying our neighborhoods. But when I look at sort of legislation and policy in terms of what I can influence, I do sort of put on the Boston blinders, but I also look at what other places are doing. I will just quickly say that I've also had someone in Boston bring up this issue to me about being able to sell. And it's one that I would take to heart, and we'll think about what we can do. I will also say that you see similar arguments when it comes to affordable home ownership. When you talk about limiting the equity that someone can make off of an affordable home that they're able to buy. And, there are trade-offs, right? You create affordable home ownership opportunities for someone who otherwise wouldn't have the capital because of structural racism and all these barriers to buy a home, but then they want to sell a home and then they want to sell it for profit at the market rate, which is a problem because then you create a barrier for the next person who needs an affordable home. So I'm just saying that I need to take a deeper dive into this issue. I will say that it plays itself out in different spaces like affordable home ownership. When we're talking about, I think, and people are lamenting that, oh, you're preventing a Black family from being able to gain wealth by being able to sell their home for fully realize the profit at the market level. But if you do that for one person, you're then creating a barrier for the next person who wants an affordable home. And so I'm not saying I have the answer because I think it's hard, but there are trade-offs that we're always thinking about when it comes to the work of equity.
I want to get one question, and I know we have to close up. Because
if I can just add one thing, like I think, as Ruthzee said, it is important that we look at Cambridge, Boston, Somerville, and other cities and what we could be doing, how we can be aligning ourselves, utilizing our resources in a more intentional way so that we can combat many of these issues that are really impacting our entrepreneurs and small businesses, because it's happening across our cities. And if we're not really aligned and on the same page, it doesn't take anything from any of our business owners to leave from Cambridge and go into Boston or to go to Somerville or any other city where maybe they're doing it better. So if we're not kind of understanding those best practices from each other or working together so we're aligning our resources and everything, there's just a lot more work that we need to be doing. And I look forward to hopefully collaborating and just talking through some of this work more.
One last thing. From the nonprofit perspective, when we're talking about people who are looking to start a business, whether it's a micro business or a startup, they're turning a lot of times to the nonprofits. They Google, where can I go to get the support? But the nonprofits aren't getting the funding to do so, to help a lot of the next generation of aspiring business owners reach what they need to be successful, to reach those networks. And so I think from a legislative perspective, entrepreneurship needs to be viewed as a path towards liberation and economic development, because right now it's not from a funding perspective. We can't do the work that we need to do because the city and state aren't viewing entrepreneurship as the path towards that.
I just do want to, I want to shout out my ASH fellows, my other fellow ASH visiting fellows here. Please wave your hands up in the room. Hey! Also, all the greatest minds in the room, and also Marie Furman for always holding it down. And also for the staff of the ASH Center, you guys are wonderful. But I do want Ken Reeves to give us some, as the elder statesman here, to give us one word of a question and a comment.
Here we go. Thank you. Heavy lifting. Well, I'm bursting with pride because as I see Sean and Chip and Dennis and Ayesha, I know their stories, and I'm just immensely proud of these progeny of Cambridge that I had a little bit to do with. So, and Dennis, you left out. You're the child of two entrepreneurs, so you didn't just fall off the watermelon. And Chip is a genius grandfather that is all up in him. And this gentleman, Mr. Sean, is the son of a PhD, so he didn't fall off the truck either. And this Ayesha is Jamaican and is a brand new homeowner, because all of this to me is rooted. Once you get to home ownership as a Black person, I think your eyes open. And as all of you know, and I got somebody that are gonna kick on hard, it's just important in this society to understand the role of money and access to it. And I've always found a million people have come to me, almost that many, to say, I want to start a business. And my question to them is, how much square footage do you need, and how much per square foot can you pay? And that gets rid of 4/5 of them. That just knocks it out. Then I would have these wonderful Black women who cook. get me a restaurant.
You know this.
Get me a, this is for Bethune Kelly, who died last week. But where is my restaurant, Ken Reeves? So find a restaurant. Here's the rent. Oh my God. And Bethune, do you know how much it costs to have a commercial oven? It costs X thousands of dollars. I don't need that. So there's a lot of attitude and thinking, but it's the access to capital. Some woman, angel behind me here, kept saying the money, the money, the money. Where do we get the money is the question, because you cannot be in business without money. And as someone who has also been a small business person, because I had my own law firm, you know, thank God for my mother who invested in me. But I always had access to enough capital to tide me over some thin times. And that's what I think makes the difference between who succeeds and who fails. So I would say, I want to come to part 2 of this. And I want to just talk about money and how you get it and how you build it, because that is, that's what runs America. It's what runs Harvard. Once money gets funny here at Harvard, things change, if you didn't notice. So the money is the question in America. So great panel. Mr. King, I'm glad to see that you were bringing the Canterbridgians into Harvard as we should be. We've been around here a long time and we're a part of this community. And after all, Cambridge began in 1630. Harvard didn't get here till 1636. So it all started with we the people of Cambridge.
And just to let everyone know, Ken has received the highest medal of honor at Harvard, the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal this year. Highest honor. So we are proud of you very much. Thank you guys. Please, I know that the center is a new space, right? And it's busy. So we gotta reshape this room and turn to something else for another thing. So, but we can be in the kitchen area and there's lots of food that are still here. So thank you, everybody. I didn't get my part. It's Dennis. And the after parties is at Dennis's tonight. Avoid the question. You know, you know what?